This is Live Talk with Dwayne Moore. We're talking worship on a global scale.
Hey everybody, this is Dwayne Moore. I want to welcome you to Live Talk this week. Our guest is Josh Miller. Josh is the worship development pastor at Saddleback Church in California. You're going to enjoy our conversation today with Josh as we talk about how they pour into leaders at Saddleback Church, one of the largest churches in the United States. And he is responsible for pouring into their worship teams especially, but just how their culture of leadership and development of leaders is amazing. So you're going to hear about that today in Live Talk. But first I want to ask you to pray for us. I'm standing here in a hotel in Johannesburg, South Africa, and we are preparing in just a few moments to go over to the airport, which is next door here, and we're going to fly out and go over to Zambia. So we did a 16-hour flight yesterday, slept a little bit here at the hotel, and now we're heading on over to Zambia to do a full week of mission work with vacation Bible schools, pouring into children, teaching them the gospel, teaching them about true worship, and also discipling and building up pastors and worship leaders from around Zambia as well as other countries. This is a huge opportunity. Would you pray for us, please? And then I'm going to stay in the month, throughout the whole month of August, in Africa. So please pray for me, and we'll have other teams coming in throughout the month to join me. So it's going to be a great month, and thank you again for being here to watch Live Talk. And in just a moment, we'll be back with Josh Miller. Thanks.
Live Talk with Dwayne Moore. Biblical worship perspective.
Hey everybody, we are back with more Live Talk. As you can tell, I'm very excited about this conversation. Josh, I guess we met each other at Cedarville University. That was back in earlier this year, I guess it was.
Yeah, it feels like a long time ago, but yeah, I was at Cedarville.
It feels like it. That's what I know. I think it was actually this year, or maybe the beginning of the year. I know it was cold outside, and it's the opposite now. It's very, very hot. So at least it was that many months away. Well, this is Josh Miller, everybody. Josh, you are at Saddleback Church. I'm not going to say where exactly, but I just know it's in this big state called California, but not really sure where in California.
Yeah, in Orange County. So in Lake Forest is where our broadcast campus is.
Okay.
And but we have 14 campuses in Southern California. But I'm at our broadcast campus here.
Broadcast campus. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I've had the opportunity to come out there. Never actually been on one of your campuses, but back when Rick Muchow was still leading there, he invited me out to something Capistrano. What do they call it?
Rancho Capistrano.
Rancho Capistrano.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And and got some worship leader people and kind of discipling kind of people in that world together. It was only 12 or 14 of us, and we had this just about 4 or 5 days together. And but beautiful. I'll just say, I don't know if you're anywhere near that. That was gorgeous.
We go there, a lot for our retreats and summits. A lot of times when we gather our worship leaders, we go there because it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
So that's not, just to orientate me, that is not far from where your broadcast campus is.
No, not far at all. Probably about 20 minutes.
Okay, 20 minutes. We went over to the office of the Worship Leader magazine while we were there, and that wasn't too far. And so it's just kind of all there together. I've been out to Riverside, and I spoke at the California Baptist University, CBU.
Yep. Yeah.
But I don't know where you are in. So I'm not familiar with the California line. I haven't been out there much.
Yeah. CBU is great. CBU is about probably 45 minutes to an hour.
So it all's in that area. So I brought my son Justin out there, and we also went to Santa Monica.
Oh, beautiful.
Had a lot of fun. But hey, we're here to talk about you, man. I don't know why I keep talking about California, but California's a cool place. But we want to hear what you're doing, because your title, our producer Barry sent me this to make sure I got it all right. You are the worship development pastor.
Yeah.
Saddleback Church. What is? Good night, man. I think you're the first one I've ever met with that title. That's awesome.
You know what? Sometimes I forget what my title is too. So I mean, I don't pay too much attention to that, but it is a joy to do it. I mean, I've been at Saddleback. October will be about 8 years, and kind of my role. I have two parts of my role. One part of my role is worship leading and helping with our music releases, our original music, leading the writing team, leading the team that does the releases. And my other side of my job, the development side of my job, is helping Saddleback in the discernment process for hiring worship leaders, and all things platform. And I partner with our global worship pastor, who's John Cassetto. He's a mentor of mine, a leader for our team and our church as it pertains to the purpose of worship. And so I'm under his leadership, and I help just the discernment process of onboarding worship leaders. Do they fit our ecosystem and what we're trying to do as a church? Helping encourage, resource. We have 18 campuses in total, 14 in Southern California, and then 4 international campuses. And just partnering with our worship leaders and building teams and what they go through on a week-to-week basis. We stay busy over here at Saddleback, and so I just really try to view myself as a partner in ministry and coming alongside our worship leaders and what they need.
Yeah, well, when I met you at Cedarville, and you were introduced, I don't remember if it was Dwayne Lee or Roger O'Neill, but whoever introduced you that day to that, we were part of that panel discussion that I was on. They said worship development or something, and it got my attention because I just don't know many churches that focus and think that's even worth giving a title to, much less of emphasis to. I don't mean to denigrate anybody. Sure. We're all busy and we have our very small staffs, and we got to get the job done. I get it. But the fact that you guys see the importance of developing people off the platform and not only on the platform is so powerful to me. And you and I very briefly spoke about that. And so I've been looking forward to this conversation to talk about that. So, one of the things that it sounds like you're very involved with the production, I'm assuming you actually lead as well, as teach others.
Yeah. I lead maybe once or twice a month at Lake Forest at which is our broadcast campus. We call it our broadcast campus because that's where Pastor Rick is. That's where our broadcast is coming from. And then the rest of the month, I'll go to different campuses and, just be a part of their weekends or be there to encourage. It really depends on the season of our church and which campuses are vacant. We have a few campuses that are looking to hire worship leaders. So I'm there with the campus pastor, kind of helping come alongside him to discern who we need in that spot, given their church and where they are. And so that's kind of my monthly flow.
Okay. Well, I want to get into a few things with that, if just drill into some of that, because I know we got people watching. And by the way, we don't ever know who exactly watches. We know we've got some worship leaders, we've got pastors, not only here in the States, but with online, it's hard to kind of keep a wrap on who all is out there watching. But we know that we have people that watch even in Asia, because this broadcast over satellite television there. So some people watching may not even understand what we're saying. The TV director there told me, he said, they just like to watch you talk. I said, really? The funniest thing to me. So for those who can understand English, especially my Southern version of it, we may have some people, Josh, that are watching that they don't understand why we even do worship. And so some of the things I want to drill into is the whys under the whats, as well as some of the tips and the whats. But let's start with you and your background and maybe your family, just whatever you want to tell us about Josh. Let's start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually grew up Assembly of God all the way to my early 20s. My dad was a preacher. Eventually became a senior pastor of a small church in Central California. And so I'm a church kid through and through. Like, I believe in the church. I'm a local church kid. And it was a pretty small church. And I actually really enjoyed that growing up because I knew everyone, and it was like my intimate community. And grew up Assembly of God, and I still love the AG peeps. I love those people and consider them my family. And I I went to a Nazarene university in San Diego, Point Loma Nazarene University. And now I'm at Saddleback. So I've really enjoyed just the diversity of the church and just what different denominations bring and how we kind of learn from each other and our strengths and weaknesses. And so I came to Saddleback in my early 20s and came on staff as the college worship leader, and then also at Lake Forest leading there and just kind of next gen worship leader, and just helping develop a pipeline from our college students, from high school when they get to college, through college to the weekends, and really trying to help the development pipeline. And that's kind of when I discovered, Dwayne, my love for worship leader development and just encouraging young worship leaders and making space for them. And I laugh because I was trying to make space for young worship leaders, and I was barely older than them, and if not the same age of them. And so my love for worship leader development happened at a very young age because I was the recipient of good worship leader development, and a lot of times you find worship leaders all the time. They found their love and passion for worship leading in youth group or summer camp. And that's when they found their love for worship leading. A lot of times they try to pay it forward. They try to develop worship leaders as well. And so that's kind of what happened to me. Ministry home, ministry background, all I know is church. And I think that's a testament to a pastor's kid who had a good dad. Dad's not with us anymore. He passed away a handful of years ago from cancer. But growing up, I just found a deep appreciation for church, and now I'm able to do it, every day, which I'm really grateful.
Isn't that awesome? I mean, it's so cool. I mean, there are days it feels like a job, but I mean, honestly, it is a privilege to get to
it's such a privilege. Yeah.
Well, I love your perspective, and I loved it when I met you, and I sensed you got just a freshness about what you're doing, and it hadn't grown stale to you. So I just want to glean from some of that today in our conversation. Yeah. But so maybe just in a train of thought here to go along with what you said, you talked about a pipeline. I'd love to hear. What does that look like at a church like Saddleback? And keep in mind, most of the churches that are watching, most of the pastors aren't anywhere near your size, but I bet there's still some things we could glean from a process.
Sure.
You obviously don't just let a person walk up on the platform and start singing or playing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for context, our campus is vary in size. I mean, not every campus is giant, is huge. There are different sizes of campuses, and we love that about our church, that you can, whatever you want, like whatever type of church or what type of size you're comfortable with, you can find a campus that suits that. As far as worship leader development, I mean, a lot of how we operate and how we operated then when I first came on staff is the first and foremost discerning shape. Saddleback, we call it shape, and it's a class that you take when you're coming to Saddleback. And when we've identified that person's shape to be worship or music, there's different ways that they can contribute to the church. And for worship leaders, you're right. It's so hard you can't just go on stage and start leading. There's a process. There's a journey for worship leaders. And a lot of the way we've identified that is through internships. And so if we get young worship leaders and we've identified there to be a lot of potential in them as a worship leader, we'll invite them to do an internship for Saddleback. And Saddleback is so busy that it's really hard to find a really strict curriculum, maybe for an intern. So we approach it from a supervisor position. So if someone comes to our church and they want to get involved in worship, and they've identified themselves as a worship leader and they want to grow in worship leading, we'll have them apply to intern with Saddleback Worship. And I usually ask them for maybe some goals. We assess where they are as a worship leader, how much experience they've had, and we try to discern what their goals are, and we pair them with a worship leader on staff that suits their goals and their needs. And of course, from an internal perspective, we have to assess which worship leaders on staff are have the bandwidth to have an intern, because having an intern can be a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I mean, you have to make space for them in your meetings. You have to create work for them. There's just so much that goes into having an intern. But we found that the internships is a really sweet, organic way to train worship leaders, and not only train worship leaders, but mold worship leaders to what we would need at our church. Because every church is just so different. Every church has different needs and desires and different missions and different purposes. And so for our worship leader interns and music director interns, those that maybe lean more on the band side, leading a band, we felt that internships is a great way to equip, develop, and mold. And so we have interns anywhere from 6 months to a year. And they're usually 25 to 30 hours a week minimum. And that's just one way. As far as the pipeline, I have just such admiration for our student ministry department here at Saddleback, because we have student worship leading students. So there's always peers on stage. So if you're in junior high and you go into junior high service, you're being led by junior high worship leaders. And wow. So it's always the cream of the crop. It's just really fun to go see them lead and partner with our student ministry worship pastor, David Stone. And we're trying to be in dialogue with him on who's coming up the pipeline, coming out of student ministry, going into college ministry, college worship leaders leading college students, and discerning whether it be internship or getting them more exposed to our weekend services to try to keep them in the ecosystem. And kind of, it's student by student case. Not some students leave California for college, but that's kind of how we approach the pipeline, through internship, through identifying them as they get older, through our church, who needs to be brought closer to start getting developed as a worship leader, and who just wants to be part of serving their church on the band or the vocal team. It's kind of an organic system that way.
I love it. What do you? Yeah, I got the impression, but I think I read it in. I don't think I heard you say it. I just assumed it. You said something about it's hard to basically cookie cut one resource for everybody, kind of thing. So does the intern leader, the person that is leading that intern and responsible for that intern, does that person evaluate that intern in their own minds and go, okay, I think we could go through this together, or we could talk about this together? Do they develop their own path to help that person grow, is my point?
Yeah, I think it's a conversation. Every worship leader that we've hired, there's been an understanding of how we're approaching our worship pastor position. So there's an agreement of vision, values. We hold loosely to style, because everyone comes in as a worship leader with different backgrounds and different upbringings. But as far as vision and goals as a worship leader at Saddleback Church, we've kind of stacked hands on that. And it's really an organic conversation of this intern seems to need to grow in these areas, maybe these 2 to 3 areas. Sometimes it's they're vocal. Sometimes it's their communication on stage, their preparation, their running their rehearsal, using themes to tie in a set to set up a message. I mean, there's so many things, that they could work on. And sometimes I really base it off of the worship leaders we have, their capacity and their sweet spots to pair with that intern. I have a few sweet spots as a worship leader. I also have things I'm not as good at as some of our other worship leaders. So we all have our strengths and weaknesses. And so how can we pair them with the needs of the intern that's coming through?
Okay. Yeah. Well, what I'm trying to kind of, get at, and you're answering wonderfully, this is exactly what I think people would want. I'm trying to think in terms of, if I was watching this, what am I hoping someone's going to ask you so we can learn from you? And one of those things is, okay, so you're taking someone through a process, be it 6 months or a year. Love that. And you mentioned the word vision. So vision of your particular church and your particular direction under the leadership of your pastor is vitally important, obviously. And so it sounds like, if I gathered correctly, that's one of the things you're wanting to pour into these interns is the vision, not only of their own life, but how that connects with the vision of the church. Would that be
absolutely? And every church has different goals, and so I think it's really hard to bring in an intern or say a volunteer who wants to grow in worship leading. We have to cater our development according to what Saddleback is looking for. I mean, we could do a general worship leader training, which is great, but I think the honor of always trying to develop according to what our senior pastor is trying to lead us in. And, Saddleback, for instance, for context, is a church catering for the seeker to come in and experience Christ in a new way. And we would approach our weekend services different than we would maybe a midweek night of worship that's catered for our core members. And so it's really an interesting journey to help worship leaders discover their calling, but also every worship leader has to lay something down when they're leading worship in a space where they're honoring their leadership. They're trying to set the table for the members to worship. And so just teaching them those values and helping them grow as a worship leader.
Love it. Okay. All right. So this is very, very helpful. And for those watching that may be in a church of 100, you go, well, gee, how do we create a program like that? It all starts with intentionality of doing something.
Yes.
So I think, we can glean from the idea of committing to someone in a mentoring style relationship. Sounds like it's a part of what you do. You said it takes work and effort, but if you imagine, I'm just talking to everybody else, not Josh. Josh gets it, he's living it. But for the rest of us, imagine if you poured into 2 or 3 people for a few months, and if someone you may lose them, they may move away, life happens, but 2 out of those 3 stay with you.
Yep.
And 1 out of those 3 stay with you a long time and continue to help build the vision that God's put in your heart. I'm talking as a pastor or a main worship leader. Don't you think it'd be worth that? It'd be worth it. And even if it's not big numbers, not 100, it maybe only be a few. But to me, that's what I hear these guys are doing. Now they're developing across different campuses. Sure, it's a larger system, but it all comes down to intentionality and pouring into people. Would you agree with that, Josh?
I would agree. And I 2 things that we talk about a lot at Saddleback is we call our leaders to be administrators. Our ministers are administrators. We're empowering others to lead the ministry, to multiply yourself. I mean, if you think about Jesus, he could have done all of it by himself, but he chose to bring some disciples along the way.
Wow, yeah,
to multiply his ministry and his voice. And then the second thing we talk about at Saddleback is you can never work your way out of a job at Saddleback if you're developing and empowering. So there's this, so church work is this upside down philosophy, right? Because normally you want job security, you want to do everything and make yourself so vital that if you take yourself out of the equation, everything falls apart. But Saddleback, the good ones, and our philosophy is if you can empower and develop more people to carry the ministry, and you become a coach, encourager, shepherd, you're actually doing it the right way, because you're inviting more people to exercise their God-given shape in kingdom work. And so it's really an upside down model, but I really love it, because how beautiful is it to see other people do what they've been called to do. And to be honest, it's not as taxing, because everyone's sharing the load. Everyone's doing it together.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's great. I want to ask you too, because you do have multiple campuses, and there are more and more churches that have multiple campuses. Are there times when you say, okay, we're going to do this retreat, or we're going to meet together, we're going to do this thing together, we're going to have a grow weekend? I mean, I don't know. I'm just talking out loud.
Yeah.
I'm simply asking, do you ever get them all together? That's what I'm
Absolutely. So we have a worship summit once a year at the beginning of the year, where all worship leaders, sometimes we even get the international worship leaders out here, and we spend 3 days, 2 nights together. And we're doing it for a few reasons. One, we're getting a pulse on everyone. How is everyone doing? Like, are they limping into summit? Are they, sprinting? Are they doing well? Trying to get a pulse as to how everyone's doing. And that's really helpful for me, Dwayne, to know which worship leaders I maybe need to lean into more, just as an encourager, as a partner. Because with 18 campuses, it's hard for me to know how everyone's doing at the same time. And then as far as like growth weekends, in the past we've done these things called We Get to Do This weekends, where we get shirts made, and it's a recruitment weekend at all of our campuses for more worship leaders, more worship team members to come on board. And just, we all wear the shirt. We have a booth at the lobby, and it's a way for people to understand that like there's still more room on the worship team. If you're a musician, if you're a singer, because sometimes when you're attending church, say you're a musician, and you always see people on stage, you might think there's no room for you, or you might think like, hey, they're good. They have a worship team already. But they don't realize that we actually would love to be five drummers deep, or, we would love to have, more vocalists on the team. And so we've done that before. It's called We Get to Do This week. It's really fun. You get to see a lot of people join team because we've done those things. And then throughout the year, Dwayne, we try to gather together as much as possible for doing a purpose-driven conference. The worship team is all campus worship leaders. We're on stage together.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then, it's really fun. And Pastor Rick leads the sessions at those, but our worship teams come together and we lead together, and we find, random parts of the year where we try to get together. It's just always beautiful when we're together, because we're so busy at our isolated campuses, mm-hmm. that when we get together, it's almost like we can just recharge and dream and do things together.
Well, I want to take a break for a moment. We've got a video we want to show. We are leaving in 1 week from today for Africa. We'll be in 4 African countries. I'm awesome. Talking to Josh here because he hadn't had the opportunity to hear this. People that watch you each week have heard me talk and ask for prayer the last few weeks, but this is a big trip for us. Of the year, this one is shaping up to be the largest as far as potentially impactful. We'll be we're doing an intensive school for worship leaders and their pastors. Can you imagine bringing a worship leader and a pastor together for a whole week?
So great.
Some pastors and worship leaders don't even talk hardly, or ever have a conversation. We're going to actually turn their chairs toward each other, and they're going to have conversations about how to apply the principles they are learning in our school, and they're going to be able to take those back to their church. So it's going to be really powerful. Very cool. In Zambia. Yeah. And then from there I go actually, and I join up with another part of our team down in South Africa. And I'll be doing 5 conferences in South Africa, including Cape Town. Nobody's feeling sorry for me on that one, but it's fun. No one's feeling like it's suffering for Jesus down there. But I'm excited about that. And then from there, we go to Zimbabwe. We'll be doing a team retreat with our team in Zimbabwe and doing a couple of conferences. And then we go to Kenya. Yeah, Kenya, we're going to do another intensive school like we did last year. We'll be back there doing another intensive school. And we got teams come from the United States and other countries just to pour into these guys all week long. So God is so good.
Very cool.
So I'm
Very
praying,
good.
I'm asking for prayer, adding Josh to the list now. Please pray. We've got
Yes.
just for all the traveling issues nowadays, just pray it goes smoothly and we all get there from different campuses, different parts of the country. We all converging on Atlanta and flying over. But so we're going to show you a video about that. We'll take a break moment. We'll be back with Josh. Josh, when we get back, I really want to hear more about your production. You talked about recordings. You're involved with that. Can we just talk shop a little bit with those watching
Absolutely.
that, just how do you guys write songs, create songs, produce songs? I think everybody love to hear a little bit about that, and just whatever you want to talk about. Won't keep you much longer. You got a real job out there, and I'm just the guy having fun interviewing you. Don't keep you much longer, but I do want to come back and talk about that. Okay?
Absolutely.
All right. We'll be right back.
Yeah, I come here to share experience and to take to be part of this training. Actually, it's a very wonderful training. I learned different things here for my training materials. And also I learned different aspects of theological worship. So it was so wonderful time. Thank you so much for everything.
But true worship, negativo de pegámelo, es una liga. Si hay all day, but we look at every day. But we look at good times, bad times. But we look at every happy times.
Worship starts from inside, then it can be upside, above to the God, and then outer level. I understand this, so I want to thank Next Level Worship Training to be invited to this training, because in Ethiopia, in our country, the skill we have in worship is poor. So we upgrade our skills to be whole in Christ, to see Christ, and to worship God, heavenly songs.
You're listening to Live Talk with Dwayne Moore. International conversations on worship.
Hey, folks, we are back with more Live Talk. Josh Miller's with us. He is the worship development pastor, among other things, that he gets to do at Saddleback Church in California, in Orange County, California. And Josh, you were telling us, for those just joining us, that you guys have 18 campuses. If I'm remembering what you said, 14 in California, but also 4 internationally.
Yeah. 4, Buenos Aires, Berlin, Hong Kong, and Santa Rosa, Manila. Those are our 4 international campuses. Yeah.
Interesting. We don't work in any of those countries, so that's interesting. But I'm glad that you guys do. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I love it how I see God is spreading the body, people out in the body all around the world, and we work in a bunch of countries, but not any of those. So that's really cool. Well, good. So welcome back, and we want to drill down into a couple things that I've heard you say that might have tweaked someone's interest. It certainly didn't mine. You mentioned a little bit, just part of what you do is some production work. I took it like that. I took it to mean maybe even recordings. Man, do you guys write your own songs sometimes? Do you have if you do, that's got to be kind of fun.
It's so fun. We do write our own songs, and we've really probably in the past, well, Rick Machow wrote his own songs and they were wonderful. And Rick Machow is legend around here and around the world. And we've just we went through a season where we really wanted to put an emphasis on our team and our development of our team. And then about a handful of years ago, we started writing songs. About 8 years ago, we started writing songs. And then even in the last few years, we've made it just a high priority to keep creativity at the center of our team. And so we do write songs for our church, and it really intensified probably over lockdown in 2020. We were all isolated in our homes, and we were writing songs, Dwayne, over Zoom calls.
Yeah.
And over 2020, we wrote 100 songs, maybe 100 songs. Wow. And then we released 13 of those songs, an album. And we've just been keeping those songs in rotation in our worship sets. And we've been getting in this rhythm of writing songs for our church and discerning which songs need to be in our services and leading those songs, and kind of getting a temperature on how our church is responding to those. And, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but there's so many campuses. So there's a lot of different types of artists and worship leaders from different backgrounds at our church. And so we try to really diversify our releases. So we've done, we have a Buenos Aires campus, an Espanol campus in Southern California. We've released a Spanish album. At the beginning of this year, we released a gospel EP. And right now we're in production on a single that was recorded live at a night of worship a few weeks ago. And so we're always releasing, we're always writing new songs, because we believe that our church, those songs become our church's songs. It's not just the songwriters and the person singing it, but when a song is released at a church, no matter what the size of the church, those songs become an anthem for that church and that house. And it kind of unifies the church in a way, because everyone's seen it from its birth. We're singing it. Those are prayers that were birthed from our church. And so it's been a really special thing for our church, Dwayne.
Yeah, I think this culture that has happened there, and I know it's intentional, of writing your own songs, is something that I wish I saw more churches do. So that's why when you mentioned it, I thought, yeah, we need to highlight that. And because I can tell you the mindset, because I've had it myself. I've planted churches, and I've been in small as well as larger situations. And you just feel like, I don't have the time or the resources or the people.
Right.
We planted a church in Birmingham, Alabama. And for the first 3 years, we didn't have the resources of people. Well, I felt like, but then, we had other things. We're, just trying to form a team and figure out what we were doing. But after about 3 years, we went away and did a retreat with our leaders and divide them up into little groups, and just, hey, no pressure, but just see what happens. And so there was some direction given before they got there. But ultimately, we just want to make it just enjoyable and time to get together and no pressure about what may come out of it. Well, we wrote some really good songs that became songs of our church. That one of those at that time, the culture in our church was really focused on adoption, and there were a lot of people waiting to adopt, and they couldn't adopt. In fact, one day our pastor, who also adopted, had all the people waiting for adoptions to line up, and it went from one end of the gym to the other of people just either had just adopted or just hoping to adopt. So one of the songs that came out of that emphasis was a song by a couple in our praise team that wrote a song about waiting on the Lord. It was so powerful. Wow. And so we sang that. It became a part of our culture. So I'm telling you, we were a church of 150 people, but it can be done. And so I just wanted to bring that to everybody's, just to highlight, look what's happening with Saddleback. They're doing it, but they're not waiting around for all the stars to line. You just get out there and get a group of people together, right, Josh, and start doing it.
And it's really, and a lot of it too is just discerning where the church is going and writing songs for your church, and not writing out of personal preference, because when you write kind of out of obedience and to where the church is going, God can really use those songs. And it stirs up really great collaboration too between your worship team, your pastors. We send all of our songs to a teaching pastor or two to get theological check. That's smart. Just to get on the same page and make sure we're going in the same direction. But it's so fun. It's fun. It there's a lot of fruit in it. It's so beautiful to see your church singing songs that were coming out of that house. I mean, I've had conversations with people on the patio, and that has led to a song. I mean, it's just so organic and so binding in such a beautiful way when you do that.
Well, I believe it's Darlene Check that I heard say this, but when she was there, actually beginning the Hillsong culture of music that's there so strong now. But in those beginning years, she said when we got together to write, we didn't write for an album. She said we didn't try to write to make sure we got songs on an album. She said we wrote out of what you just said, Josh, out of what God is doing in our churches and just what He put on our hearts. She said some of them made albums and a lot didn't.
Yes.
And do you think that's important, not to say, okay, we got to make sure we hit some standard on that, but we want to just kind of let it be organic, even in the way the church receives them and whether or not they ultimately make an album cut or not.
I agree. I think you're writing prayers in a lot of ways. And I think I think it was Andy Rozier who told me this, that like, even if this song doesn't get heard by anyone after this writing session, it was special enough. It was good enough because we were communing with the Lord. So sometimes a song that's written and you're just surrounded by the presence of the Lord, if no one else hears it, it was a good use of time. And I think some songs were written and made for your alone time with the Lord, and some were meant to be heard by a lot of people. And I think both are special and both are a good use of your time. And it's interesting to see how the Lord uses a collection of songs for the church, for the glory of the Lord. And He makes it known along the way. He shows you which songs need to be released. But some of my favorite songs, Dwayne, are songs that no one will ever hear. There's these private prayers, these private laments, that it was such a good use of my time because I experienced the presence of God in a new, fresh way that day.
Well, I think we all need to remember that ultimately that new freshness is so vital in worship leading, that first of all, that worship comes from a heart that is worshiping, and we teach that at Next Level Worship, and I know that's what you teach too. So, as we kind of bring it to a close, there's a couple things I'd like to take a moment on, and that's how do you keep yourself fresh, Josh, and what do you, and how does that express itself in the way you develop others? And the second thing is, why you do this anyway? Why are you worshiping this God you can't even see? Now, you know where I'm going with that. Yeah. Because we got people here that I'm not saying, I don't know who's watching, but potentially we have Hindus and Muslims and others, and God loves them, all these people. Well, God loves you, whoever you are, wherever you are in the world. Yeah. So I'd love for Josh to just take a moment to talk about your own personal walk with the Lord and how you keep that fresh. And secondly, why do you bother with all this anyway?
Yeah, that's so good. I think to work with the last question first, why do I do this? I do this because Pastor Rick says this all the time, because the church is the only thing that lasts forever. When it's all said and done, the kingdom of God is going to be standing, and the church is the only thing that lasts forever. So if I'm going to use my life to invest in anything, it's going to be for the glory of Christ and for the church that He's built. I'm going to give all my time for that. And then a way to keep myself fresh. I probably said this when we were at Cedarville. So if you've heard me say this already, my bad, Dwayne. But I've taken a lot from the story of Samuel, of when he first discovered the voice of the Lord, and when he learned to say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." I've made it a life motto to get back to the basics of hearing the voice of God. And when I find myself stretched or overwhelmed or just busy, because ministry can be taxing at times, I really try to make my way back to what my dad used to call the prayer closet, the secret place, and just tune back into the voice of the Lord. That's why I love songwriting so much, if I'm being honest, is because it forces me to a place of intimacy with the Lord. And a lot of people who burn out in ministry, I found, is they've gone too long doing it on their own strength. And people in ministry are very talented. We could do this for a while on our own skill, strength, charisma, experience. But at some point, you're going to be on empty and there's nothing overflowing. You're on the platform. I mean, you're drawing from experiences from the past or a word from the Lord that you've gotten 5 years before. So it's really important for me to stay in that quiet space with the Lord. That's how I stay fresh. I could tell you I read all these books and I go to all these conferences which all of those are important and great, but it always comes back to my quiet time with the Lord when he speaks things over me that are unique and special. And I draw from that and God's word. That's how I stay rooted and stay fresh. And then what was the third thing?
There really wasn't a third. I mean, you just nailed it. I didn't really have it other than I think what I said is whatever you want to send us out on, man.
Yeah.
I think that's what I said.
I really love it, Dwayne. My wife is a OBGYN physician. So we have very different ministry lanes. I consider her a minister because of the lives she gets to touch on a daily basis. But I just find it such a joy to set my hands to this. Like it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like I'm an imposter. If I'm being honest, like I'm learning as I go. I think we all are in a certain way. And I'm just grateful that I get to set my hands to, something that lasts forever.
Amen. Well, you've been a really encouragement to us today, especially I think those watching that are worship leaders. I'm sure we've taken away some things we can glean from this. With your permission, we might even consider putting this into a couple blog articles, just taking some of the things you've said and inserting it into a written form, because, sometimes people don't take time to watch or listen to a podcast, but they might read a segment on an article. So, I mean, just because this is so rich, it's so needed, and our heart at Next Level Worship is to encourage worship leaders wherever they are in the world. And you've certainly given us some things that apply not only across cultures, but also in sizes of churches. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you for your ministry, Dwayne. You've blessed me, and just grateful for your impact on the kingdom and worship leaders. And thanks for having me on this. I appreciate it. Yeah,
it's great. Well, thank you guys for watching, wherever you are in the world, watching or listening to Live Talk. And we will be back again next week. Over the next few weeks, I'm not sure how much I'll be able to, to broadcast from Africa. Depends on where they have a signal or not. And so we have pre-recorded some interviews, and just to make sure that we can continue on with our weekly broadcast. But as much as possible, we're going to chime in and record it from Cape Town or from Harare or wherever, and just take a few moments and give you some updates. So keep watching, and thanks again, Josh. And we'll see everybody back in some capacity next week for more Live Talk.
Thanks for listening to Live Talk with Dwayne Moore. Live Talk is presented by Next Level Worship International. To learn more about our global community and find great devotionals and other resources on lifestyle worship, visit nextlevelworship.com.